All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the PODSCast. My name is Deb Kalidas. I am so excited to be in for Monique today as she is flying to her next destination in her PODS quest that she is always on. I am brand new to the PODS team and could not be more excited as a contractor within the marketing and communications and all kinds of exciting stuff that's going on. So thank you to the multitude of, just different people who have signed up. We have over 100 individuals signed up for today. So we're beating records. So as you like what's happening today, please invite others within PODS and within the industry to be able to partake in different things. So before I allow this amazing panel to be introducing themselves this morning, I have some rules and regulations from Monique. No, they're not that. It's better of just an explanation of all that's going on today so that you know how to take advantage of the ultimate value of what is happening. So first and foremost, I want to go over if you've never been on a GoToMeeting webinar before, there is an opportunity for a chat and an opportunity to ask questions. If there is ever any issue with any of our audio or video, please make sure you put that in right away. I'm manning the controls behind the scenes here, and I want to make sure that we're all clearly heard and seen at all times. But let's get started. So we are building a community at PODS, so we're excited to have you participate. PODS was started by operators and service companies in the pipeline industry as a standard with which to increase visibility, organization, and safety of your assets. And that we strive for all PODS events to be interactive. So like I said, please ask questions, give your feedback, as this is so valuable for the volunteers, working groups, committees, and our entire community. As you can see, we are recording this session and we'll be posting it on our channel. So far, we've had incredible responses from those that have participated, and we've had many requests to share our content. And so we're going to do that. So please feel free to share the link to the channel with your colleagues. And don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn, because LinkedIn is the place where you're going to hear about more upcoming events, additional PODS features, and be able to connect with other PODS members. So that's crucial. As I stated, interactivity is the key to success here. So heads up, we're going to have a few polls questioning you today during the podcast. Within the windows, you can see the window that we have the shared presentation. You can see the presenters, but there's also another window that you can definitely set it aside so that, as you may have a primary monitor or a secondary monitor, sometimes there's issues with the voting when the window is behind the secondary monitor. So I just invite you to watch where your screen placement is so you can participate in everything. We invite you to send in questions through the questions or chat box on your control panel, and we will answer them as time allows. The last couple podcasts, we have been wonderfully flooded with questions, and we want that. But we also want to be respectful of everyone's time today. We're starting on time, we're ending on time. So if you have asked a question that we have not gotten to, you will be responded to, and we have also a record of every single question that was asked. So that might inspire future podcasts. So you never know what's going to happen with that. So if we don't get to all of the questions, don't worry, we're going to be a part of that. There will also be a brief survey when we end the PODSCast, and we would love to get your feedback as well as ideas for future topics. You're going to find a bunch of great info about PODS in the control panel for download as well. So here we go. If you're an active or current members of PODS, we would ask you to let us know in the survey if you would like to review a copy of the module for comments after the demo today. PODS members, you enjoy a ton of value like our resource center, as well as advanced review of our new releases. So if you're not a PODS member, now's the time to consider. Once a new release is approved by the PODS Technical Committee and the PODS Board of Director, it is sent to PODS member companies for review and comment. Members are encouraged to test the changes included in the new release and to submit comments back to the association on their findings. These comments are compiled and each one is always addressed. The dialogue of comments and responses is documented and included in the final release. Documentation as well as the detailed description of any modifications made to the module as a result of the comments received are always included. So here's the final note, continuing education credits. If you are an individual today that is using this training and webinar podcast as a continuing education, most professional development hours are self-reporting, but we're happy to provide you with a certificate. So email info@pods.org. So again, to write that down, info@pods.org for a certificate of completion. And Monique will be sending out that follow-up email for everyone registered today. with a bunch of info and the contact information of today's panelists if you have any additional questions. Because let me tell you, this is about networking. You're meeting 4 tremendous experts today in the field, and I encourage, and connect with them. Yep, even you, Tad. Connect with them on LinkedIn. Make sure, reach out to me, Deb Kalidas, as well. I'm always happy to help. So I am going to hand this off to Tad now. He's going to have our safety moment and agenda review. And let's have a phenomenal 54 minutes together, getting to know Kirk, Tad, Victor, and Diana, and keep those questions and things coming. So this is great.
So good morning, everyone. As Deb said, my name is Tad Nowicki. I am a pipeline compliance consultant at Rosen. We'll get into the introductions a little bit later, but basically I wanted to introduce myself before I get going. Victor, could you move on to the agenda, please? Sure. So just really quickly, Deb's already done a great job of covering the housekeeping and the podcast intro. I'll quickly go through a safety moment, then I'll talk about the PODS organization itself and the 7.0 model a little bit. We'll transition to Diana at some point to kind of talk about the background and history of the ILI working group and kind of where we've came from and where we're at now. Kurt will then kind of take over a little bit halfway through that with the overview of the ILI module and really describing how those inspection tables relate to the POD 7 core tables. And then Victor's going to kind of take up the back end of the presentation with the demo and how they're going to be loading the ILI module using using FME as a tool. And then we'll have some time at the end for some questions and answers. So real quick for that safety moment, just as school starting back up, I know my kids go back to school 1 week from today. I'm very grateful and very happy for that. Yes. So thank you, everyone who shares my pain, right? But just as a reminder, there's going to be lots of kids out now in the mornings when everybody's going off to work. Watch out for those buses. Kids aren't necessarily as smart as we like to think they are. Sometimes they just run off those buses and don't pay attention. Look for the stop signs. Just remember we're adults and we have the licenses. Those children do not. So just be careful, be alert. All right. So as we kind of think about, maybe some people might be asking this question: why are the pipeline open data standards so important? Well, one of the ways I like to think about this is, I'm sure everyone's heard this slogan, data is an asset, or data is the new gold, or some people may even hear data is the new oil, right? Well, these PODS data models really help support getting this data and storing this data. These PODS data models really set the foundation for visibility into the entire pipeline lifecycle, right? It includes projects at the beginning, full database management, it supports compliance and safety and risk identification, and one of the main things that we're going to be talking about today, integrity. These PODS models are comprehensive, they're scalable, and one of the more important things too is they're vendor neutral. So even coming from a vendor, I recognize the value of it being vendor neutral. And then lastly, they're proven. In fact, PODS is recognized as the best practice in integration platform for pipeline data and location information. So, all right, and then kind of as we talk about PODS 7.0, a more simplified, so this is kind of where, so PODS created these very large over time databases. So we've got about 25 years of member organization time and experience that have kind of built up these tables of what do we need to collect, what do we need to retain, what do we need for reporting and analysis, right? And these, I'm sure many of you guys might be on PODS 4, PODS 5 and realize that these implementations are absolutely massive. And so when you kind of really start thinking about PODS 7.0.1 or PODS just 7.0 basically, a lot of the members really took a step back and said, we really need a more simplified data model, but it really needs to be easily expandable. So that's really where this ILI module comes in. And so kind of if you think about on the next slide, Victor, we'll get into these two tables. So PODS, so this working group that included all of us on here, as well as many others, created two tables for PODS. We'll talk about those in just a little bit. This started about 3 years ago. It was the first initiative kind of to come out of these working groups or out of the pods members to say, hey, this is the next data set we need to be able to see with pod 7. And so we kind of prioritize this, and this is where we're at now. So 3 years in the making. It's a great product. We'll be going through that in just a second. And so before we get on to Diana discussing a little bit more of what pods or what the ILI module looks like, we're going to get into a poll. So real quick, I would just like to know, or I guess a lot of people would like to know, what is your main job function or role at your organization? Is it integrity management, compliance, regulatory related? Are you in GIS doing database management and attribute type work? Or are you in an IT making everything run? Or are you kind of in this other or all or none of the above type role? And so,
all right, I'm launching the poll now, Tad. So waiting
perfect.
for the, oh, look at that.
Yeah, and so while everybody's answering that question real quick, I really do want to take just a few seconds to thank all of the volunteers that supported the development of this module. As a nonprofit org, PODS really has to rely on these volunteers to be able to get this to happen. And so I'm not going to name any names. I know for a fact I'd at least leave off 2 or 3 of them accidentally. But everyone, you know who you are. Thank you. So.
All right, sharing these results. Go ahead, Tad, if you want to go through this.
All right, I'm kind of interested by the all the above. That's I was wondering if that would happen or not, but it is a nice mix to see that there's about a third integrity management and about a third GIS, and then kind of everybody else is wrapped up there. So we got a big eclectic group. That's kind of how we all are as panelists. So pipeline compliance is my function. We've got Kurt and Diana kind of maybe more on the GIS side of things and data, and then Victor works for an operator. So. All right, so let's move on to the next of those introductions. And so, like I said, I already introduced myself, Tad Nowicki, Pipeline Compliance Consultant at Rosen. And so, yeah, so next off is Victor.
Hi, Victor Relford with Plains, PA as well. I'm way up north, so if you can't hear me, it's not my fault. I'm just really far. Maybe lean in a bit, then you can hear well. Next up.
Right. Thanks, Victor. Hello, my name is Kurt Cameron from Cameron Systems. I'm a contractor for New Century Mistras Group. I provide PODS consulting, training, data analytics, along with database development and delivery. I've been on the technical committee for data modeling since its inception, so almost 25 years now, and have served as the chairman of the group 3 different times, and I'm currently in that role. I've also been a member of the history working group and the Next Gen working group, which is the group that developed the POD 7. So I'll hand it over to Diana. You're muted.
Diana, you're muted. There you go.
Thank you. Sorry, I just didn't want anybody else listening to me drinking my coffee.
So it had to happen to somebody. I'm glad it was you.
You're welcome. So yes, I'm Diana Graneski, currently with Enbridge, contractor with Enbridge, and I have been involved with PODS in some way, shape, or form for quite some time. I was actually just reminiscing about one of my first jobs in grad school, working with BP doing some PODS implementations, and that was probably getting closer to 15, 20 years ago. So I've had some experience with PODS for quite some time, and I've been on the ILI working group, co-chairing with Alejandro Reyes with Rosen for a while, and then just lots of stuff has happened over the last 3 years. So Kirk has stepped in along with Victor to help provide a lot of other background and help in moving this lovely table along. So let's get into that. If we can advance to the next slide. All right. So as just had mentioned, it's been a while in the works. And initially, we just try to gather as much potential attributes as possible. So about 125. And then we discussed with that much information, various scenarios on how to organize that data into numerous tables, whether it was by like the reference feature versus an anomaly, or organizing it by tool types or sensor types. And there's just too many attributes to collect. As Tad had said, the new Pod 7 module was really trying to take a step back and simplify. So that's where we kind of identified what was the kind of minimal viable product, like what really does an operator need to just do basic integrity research or management and all of that. And then had kind of a conversation, as in previous PODS models, of a light and a full. And we just decided that it was just too much work to try to develop two. So then we kind of mashed the MVP and light and full, like, and tried to, again, just kind of get the minimum information plus a little bit extra to, again, just get the job done. And as Kirk will explain later, there's definitely a lot of ability to extend the model to capture more information as business cases necessitate. And then again, we're trying to keep neutral also on the operator side, that this model would serve well for large operators as well as smaller operators. And a lot of our decisions that we made try to keep that, you know, just general, kind of the KISS principle of keeping it simple. And we're definitely looking for a lot of feedback on how we can improve the model. Again, we're not trying to solve all of the problems with this first iteration, but really trying to get that feedback. So I know in previous versions, there's usually a time for comment, and then we can go ahead and move forward, where this time we just wanted to release it and then get feedback and then improve it along the way. So with all these attributes, as you can see, we decided to both capture the anomalies and the reference values in the same table to mimic the pipe tally. And it just making it more easier to map the data in the import process. As Tad could probably attest to, the pipe tally and these tables are fairly similar. Would that be a correct statement, at least what Rosen generally has for a pipe tally?
Yeah, that's a great point. So we took not just pipe tallies from Rosen, but we also had some other vendors that said, hey, here's what our pipe tallies look like. And we kind of tried to get like an 85–90% consistency there to just make it as much of an exact replica as we could. Yeah.
Yep. Again, just trying to the path of least resistance, if you will. Also decided in the ILI data table to actually have the tool type that identified the feature, because some sensors identify different types of anomalies better than others. So we actually wanted to make sure that we collect which tool type that it was collected by. So then again, in that decision making, you can see that, and sorry to put you on the spot again, Tad, but like kind of, you know, if a, let's see, girth weld anomaly or some sort of SEC, you know, it might be collected potentially by the geo tool, and then is it like a axial MFL does slightly better than a circumferential? If you could just.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. So you'll see, just as your pipe tally would come in, that you might have a corrosion anomaly that would be listed with an MFLA, and then a dent might be with your geometry tool. Yeah, exactly.
Cool. And again, like we wanted to make sure that there was a general comment that might be for that feature, as well as an actual feature type description. So then that would allow the user to put in any information that they felt would be a good fit to get, than just like a comment. So again, trying to get more users or just more the searchability a little bit easier. All right. So again, please send in any questions that you might have to Deb, and we'll try to address them. Then moving on to the ILI inspection table, Victor. So as the working group discovered, there was a need for a table specifically for the actual inspection. And this could be in the future for CIS, DCVG, direct inspection, you know, kind of the list can go on. And then we needed another table that was more general, which Kirk will touch on, to actually like get the inspection range and that information, but we didn't think that you could actually contain both those sets of information in one table, just because each operator operates slightly different on how they want to capture that information. And again, trying to be as straightforward and neutral as possible. And in this table too, kind of just trying to have an inspection description and a comment, trying to separate that information out. And if you notice here, tool type is also captured. And this is designed because it's supposed to be the entire inspection of just having a comma separated field. That way, if you were to import this into a different analysis tool, you could just do a comma separated field and you could do a lot more of analysis. And then this way, the technology changes, and so we didn't really want to be stuck with a code list. And again, multiple operators kind of cluster their inspection data differently, that you could have one run today, another run a couple weeks from now or months from now, yet an operator might consider that all one run. And again, we can capture that information. And speaking of that, Tad, do you know that is a fairly easy or a fairly common business practice that sometimes an operator would have multiple runs over multiple days yet or months that are considered a single inspection?
Yeah, that absolutely happens often.
Awesome. Yeah, because again, trying to just be neutral and meet as many different business needs, whether it's a small operator or a large operator. And speaking of that, in this big data issue, Tad, like, for example, how many runs could a large operator run in a single year?
Yeah, so I mean, we've seen some operators that do a couple hundred a year. So if you can imagine how much data comes out of that 200 to 300 runs a year. And obviously some of them do none or one, but yeah, it can be quite significant.
Yeah, exactly. And kind of going with that, trying to keep those performance potential issues at bay, that we wanted to kind of figure out some way to potentially archive. And that's why there's also a just yes, no field. Is the data archived, so that we could have all of the inspection records, again, because there's not that much data here about the actual inspection, but then that you could archive previous runs, again, to help with performance, but yet you could go back to it. But again, trying to keep performance at top of mind. And speaking of big data, Victor, can you advance to the next slide, please? So yes, big data was a big issue. And that was one of the reasons too of why not to capture all 125 attributes. But if that's really what your business needs, then go right ahead and extend it, and Kirk can touch on that as well. And also in our development, we referenced previous ILI tables to see if they used more of the spatial or relational, and which one would actually work better for our business purposes with Pod 7.
So Diana, since you just mentioned ILI, we actually have an ILI data table question, if I could ask at this moment of time. So the question is, why tool type CL is stored in ILI data table? Instead, why can't it be stored in its parent table, ILI inspection table?
Well, again, as I just mentioned, that you can have combo runs that have different types of tools, but each anomaly or feature type would be then identified of which tool actually identified that anomaly, because it's very general, and depending on, again, your business case, if you are running multiple tool types, you don't really know which one identified. So we just thought that that would be better to make that decision. And Tad, you can chime in as well.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm not sure as well if this is one of those fields that is required in the ILI data table either. So it might be one of those things, again, where we tried to make this, very few of the fields are actually required to be populated. And so this might be one that if your system doesn't want to, or if your data management practices don't want to capture that, then you don't have to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is Kirk. That topic did come up during the meetings, and the consensus was that they didn't want to create a separate inspection for each of those combo tools, which is what you would have to do if you only had a single place to specify one tool. So the thought was you'd have one inspection, again, comma separated list, but that was one of the enhancements we were going to suggest, that if you wanted to actually have better tracking on that, you could track for a given inspection what tools were used. But for now, we're doing the keep it simple, put a comma separated list, and then in the actual anomaly data, it refers to what tool found that anomaly.
And you could, if you really wanted to, have an ILI inspection table for each individual run. Again, it's scalable. So if your business practice wanted to have those separate, and then you wouldn't have to store it in the ILI data table, again, trying to be more flexible was something that we really try to keep top of mind. And then also kind of with that, there's lots of conversation about repairs and how we should be able to identify which of those anomalies or even potentially features, if it was sleeved or not. And there were some tables that already existed for repair sleeve and repair device, but there really didn't seem to be enough connectivity to actually be able to track, okay, this is the anomaly that we found on this inspection, and here is the repair that was done to it. So we're, again, trying to keep that. However, the rabbit hole always presented itself in very many circular conversations about that, along with other topics. So it was definitely a struggle to try to keep that scope creep from always rearing its nasty little head. And with that, the industry jargon was another thing that was also very inconsistent, that future working groups that we suggest you kind of set some boundaries at the beginning. I see Kirk laughing right there, as he remembers lots of those in regards to line, series. If you wanted to expand a little bit on that, Kirk.
Sure, yeah. Like I said, being around PODS since its inception, the concept of line and route in the PODS relational model has just been drilled into my head. And the fact that with APR, they've kind of changed the terminology on lines and routes. And so in the meetings that I attended on the ILI group, it seemed like a lot of discussions when we were talking about ILI runs that could span a route, a relational PODS 4 route. Everyone was always like, okay, so are we talking line? Are we talking route? What are we spanning? And it just seemed like, even if we said, okay, this is the definition we're going to use, it still caused confusion. So, and I will touch a little bit on that when I talk about the PODS core, on if you have an inspection that isn't the piggable segment actually occurs on more than one PODS networking segment, how the PODS 7 core can handle that. But yes, it did cause a lot of confusion. And again, I think it added to the time it took, because we're all trying to make sure we're actually understanding what the other person was saying. So.
Yeah, thanks, Kirk. And then, yeah, finally, as I've mentioned many times, of just trying to keep that neutral design, the KISS principles, and we're really looking for feedback. Like once people are starting to implement this, I think there's actually a poll question later on that we'll be asking about implementation. So yes, we're definitely looking for feedback, and we'll change as necessary. It just really wanted to get it out to the people. And as Victor with his modeling had found some issues. So again, like, well, Kirk will mention this in a minute about the collaboration, which I think was very instrumental. But Kirk, do you want to talk about any other positive outcomes?
Sure. I think with PODS 7, we actually are using a new modeling tool. In the past, in prior versions of PODS, we had a tool that did the relational modeling, and we had a tool that did the spatial geodatabase modeling. And it was determined, rather than having to maintain two separate databases, that we would go with one model that could generate both. And so we did that with PODS 7, and this is the first working group that we're actually extending the model. So as part of this, it's been a very collaborative effort between the data modeling group and the ILI group. And really a subset of the ILI group kind of met with the data modeling group. And it was I think a very positive collaborative thing. And again, I think on the data modeling team, the consensus is, oh, we all know a lot about pipelines. That's not true. We know a lot about databases and modeling and things like that, but in a lot of cases we don't have a lot of that pipeline knowledge. So we welcome people that would like to help out. And I know the thought is, oh, I don't know a lot about databases. Well, you know a lot about pipelines, and that's what we really need. So I think that anytime we can collaborate and get others to review outside of our little group, I think it's a wonderful thing. So I think that was a positive thing. The other comment on the big data, we're hoping that Pod 7 performs a little bit better as far as putting big data in, because in the relational model earlier, you had to create a station point and an event range for all these ILI data records. And with Pod 7, it's more denormalized. So you're really not having to do a lot of joins. So we're hoping that big data, that the redesign of Pod 7 will be a positive outcome. And again, we'll know more as people load large amounts of data into it. I think that's all that I had. Okay, I'll take this one. So this is the PODS core, and it's been updated to show the ILI inspection table and the ILI data table. So those are the orange tables there. And for a typical load, you typically have one piggable segment that has one inspection, and so you have one range. So Victor, can you click? So the inline inspection, ILI inspection would have one range, and then you would have your inspection cross-ref, which essentially says, for this inspection, what ranges do I have? So typically, in the normal case where your piggable segment is your route or your networking segment in pods, it's a 1-to-1-to-1. But if you have a situation where your piggable segment doesn't line up with your networking segments in pods, and if you're more familiar with the relational days, if your routes do not match piggable segments, Pod 7 still handles that. So in this case, you would have one inspection, and you would have multiple ranges, one for each of those segments. And then Victor, if you can click again. And you would have an inspection cross-ref for each of those ranges. So essentially, one inspection, one-to-many ranges, and then one-to-many inspection cross-ref that essentially says this inspection has this range. And then finally, the ILI data, which is tied back to the inspection. And this same design will work when we get into ROV, CIS, other types of inspections. We can use the same paradigm where you would have different inspections and different results, but they would all have an inspection cross-ref and a range to correspond with that. Let's see if there's anything else I wanted to talk on that. I think also while we're here, Monique asked me to bring up that the next deliverable from pods after the ILI is the utility network model for Pod 7. And that's currently scheduled to be in October. And also there's an integrity work group that is spinning up. Marissa Majal is finalizing the charter, and they're actually looking for members. I know that's going to be in the post-survey question. If you're interested in wanting to get on that integrity working group, we would welcome your participation. And the delivery for that is scheduled to be next spring. I think we're ready for the next. So as we mentioned, there was a lot of discussion on the ILI group about what attributes we have, what are the attributes that are common, which are operator specific. And we realized we were never going to be able to get all of the attributes that would please everybody. So obviously we needed a way to extend it. Also, as I mentioned, the data modeling team is using a new tool. So we decided to have Kurt Bueller and the PODS organization contracted him to write a utility that could take a spreadsheet with a list of attributes and import it into your enterprise architect model, which is the modeling tool that we're using. And so our group actually used this tool to import those two tables. And so not only is it helpful for us, and it does validation to make sure that you have all the required columns and things that you need to actually input it into the model, but it's very straightforward to use. You open the EA diagram for the model that you're looking for. So by default, it would be the POD 701 ILI inspection range table. You open that up, and then it's probably hard to see, but the highlighted thing says module import sheet import. And you basically click that and it will import those attributes into the model. So this is what you would use to, if you wanted to add a new table, add new columns, or add new domain values to your existing model. Next slide. So some of the questions that come up in the data modeling group are, we're supporting all of these versions of the model. Are people even using them? And we have really no good way of gauging which platforms are being used. And so we are having to allocate resources to test. And it would be helpful for us to just gauge which database you're using. So the question is, what relational database management system are you using? Are you using Oracle, SQL Server, PostgreSQL, or wait, are y'all just saying random letters? So I was channeling Monique on that. I don't know if that came across, but
You did perfect. I mean, she's going to be very proud. So
awesome. So we'll give everybody a little bit of time. So if you're unsure what your environment is, you would pick the fourth one.
That's right. All right, votes are coming in. All right, I'm going to close it in about 30 seconds. So if you haven't voted, make sure you get that you're counted. We want every vote to count here at PODS always.
That's right.
Kurt, you mentioned Enterprise Architect in the last slide. Is that something that, just because I'm not one of these people that understands any of these languages, I would have selected the last one there. Is that something every operator has? Is that like, how you have to go out? Is that additional software? What is that like?
Yeah, so Enterprise Architect is a tool that PODS is using to actually do the table and column database development in. If you want to take the version that ships with PODS and never extend it, you would not need to use Enterprise Architect. Or if you're an operator and you're using a service provider that does your table changes, you probably don't need to know about Enterprise Architect. But for our purposes, Enterprise Architect allows us to use one model and be able to generate multiple physical implementations. So we use that same tool to generate Oracle, SQL Server, Postgres, and also the geodatabase implementations, all from the same model. So it's essentially a modeling tool, and there's another standalone utility called Shape Change, and Shape Change takes the model and actually produces those 4 physical models. So if what I'm saying makes sense to you and you're really wanting to be able to extend the model yourself, one of the documents that will be released with POD 7, it was with 7 and also 701 was extending PODs that goes through in high level how to do the shape change. I will warn you, it is not for the faint of heart, but it is possible to extend. But like I said, if you're using, if you have a generated model already, adding attributes to a spreadsheet and importing into that model, you would need EA to import that model into. So like I said, either the operators would need that tool or a service provider's doing that modeling for them.
Awesome. Do you want to comment at all real quick on our results?
Yeah.
So then I can, wonderful.
So looks like 68% using SQL Server, 9% Oracle, 23% unsure, and Postgres 0. So that is kind of what I suspected, but didn't want to assume that. The main appeal to Postgres is it's an open source environment. So there's advantage for us to be able to say we support an open source environment, but as you can see, no one on the call is currently using it. So I think with that, I'll hand it over to Victor.
Sure. Hey. Yeah, I don't know who asked that question about where the code lookup table should be, but we're all on this volunteering because we love talking about data modeling, and yeah, feel free to join and play in these conversations that we're having. And kudos again. I know Tad already thanked all the volunteers, but there are lots of hours that go into this, and especially on Diana's side, there was a lot of hurting generating this model, the ILI module anyway. So I'll just do a quick overview on how you would go about implementing these PODS databases, or implementing the model within your database, I guess. It's pretty easy. Whoops. You just go to the website, like you can see here, pods.org. You log in if you're a member, takes you to this members click page, and on there you'll see how to get at all the flavors available of the DDL that gets generated by the EA tool Kirk was mentioning. And so you just click on the one that you want. It gives you a zipped download of the tools or like documentation and DDL required to, and SQL in general, to generate the model. So you'll see here, you get all this content so you can read up on it, but generally you just need those 4 SQL for the SQL Server version anyway, those 4 files to download, and then you take that into your database environment. Here we're using SQL Server Management Studio, and you can see here, if we open the database that we're doing this PODS 101 fresh, you can see there's absolutely no tables generated within it. And so then you bring in those 4 files, and there's the DDL there for creating the trunk of it, the model itself, then some code lookup defaults, and then the spatial indexes that are generated at the end. So you can see it's pretty straightforward. You can just go to the one file, make sure you're pointing at the right database, and then run it with permissions. Of course, I kind of skipped over that part. That's pretty boring, but it only takes seconds. Again, all the code lookup values get inserted with these 2 files here. Again, pretty straightforward. I kind of tried to show that there were no errors, or to make sure that you check that there are no errors, but yeah, again, pretty straightforward. Second one gets pushed here. Maybe I should skip forward in the video. There we go. So that one gets generated, and you can see all of the results, no problem. And then lastly, we go to the just checking to make sure there are no errors. There we go. The spatial indexes for all the entities that contain geometry within the model. And then now when we refresh, you can see the whole model has been generated within the database in just a few minutes. It's pretty easy to do. All you need is the membership, and I was asked to remind everyone if they can't get at the files that help you generate the model with all its constraints, keys, and preferential integrity, that you should contact Monique, and she will help you get hooked up, maybe, or just late on dues or something. I don't know. Next, we'll show a sample data load into this empty model that we've just generated. Thanks, Wilson, for providing the data. I was trying to also show a lot of us are in a scenario where we have pods already, pods 4 maybe, some of us, 6 in other places that I've talked with people. And so it would be handy to have scripts, especially we're going to show a tool called FME here, to load that data from one database to another, or as you get ILI runs from vendors, to be able to load that data into your pods. So we'll be showing that here. Lost this guy. That's the actual run, but I'll just give you an overview of what the environment looks like. So this is FME. It's just the desktop app. The major selling point or beauty of FME, not only is it, well, arguably, to me, it's the self-documenting nature of it. You look at it, there's no SQL or Python or piles and piles of code to dig through. You can just see what's happening. So it's really easy to take over from somebody who had been managing it before, as opposed to trying to dig through the code and find out different flavors of functions and nuances that people like to do. So as far as the other major benefit is it has hundreds of formats that it can read and write to. So that's really the key selling point, I think, for FME, is that whether you get your sample data or your ILI data from the vendor in an Excel format, CSV, or a file geo like this, it doesn't matter. You can bring it in, and we're hoping to build a collection of these scripts that we can share within the community, and then everybody will benefit from just being able to pick one of these up and load into Pod 7, making any transition or future data loads much simpler and easier, and hopefully foolproof. So the another thing that FME helps with is all of these entities or entries into the model require their own unique ID, and thankfully FME provides that. And so you can see as you run through this, it generates a random fluid for you. And so that'll help when we go to put the data into the model. I'm not doing pretend. Ooh, we're gonna have to fly through this. Okay, so we see we have 2 inspections going in. We have a whole bunch of ILI data going in. So we'll just quickly breeze through this part where we have to have a pipeline. We can't load into the model and not reference a pipeline that we're associating this run with. And so we are generating that ID first, loading it into there with the necessary attributes. There's a whole bunch. We'll get into that some other time. Send me an email if you want to know, but there's some mandatory fields that you have to fill out. Then we do the ILI references like Kirk showed on the overview model. You have the pipeline, the inspection range, cross-reference, which ties these together, and then the actual ILI data. And then some other nice to have, so I'll show you when we do the video. We do capture some extra data that we additionally load into the model from tools that FME provides, like this stats gatherer. So let's just go to the video and then circle back if we have time after. Yeah, there. So here you can see when you run it, it gives you the option. I can talk about why we have different writers later. It's just, it allows you to order the input into the model in a different order as opposed to having one writer, which means whatever feature gets to the end first gets written out, and you don't want that. So we write out the pipeline first, then the other data gets read in and written out. And so here we can see the 2 inspections will come in, and there's another benefit of using FME is you can see the data actually flow through, and wherever the problem is, if there is one, you can capture it not only in logs, but also you can see at what point through the flow of the script it actually fails. And here you can see all of that ILI data running through. The first 400 went through no problem from the references tab. And here's where I was going to show you. We actually use this statistics collector from FME to capture the odometer min and max that's coming in from the ILI run, and then we populate that into the ILI range table because it has home for that data within it. And so again, runs fairly quickly, only a few minutes, and you'll have your ILI updated in pods. And then you'll have the results down at the bottom. I'll just skip to that part. Here you can see it's writing 1,000 at a time. You can set that again to whatever flavor you want. And see the end there. There we go. So at the end, it shows you how many features are written out. It's kind of hard to see there, but then we go back to our model. We're going to pre-run the SQL here, but we're essentially querying all the tables that we hit, and you can see the results. And then I've generated a spreadsheet to show that exact data, but color-coded so that we can see all our IDs line up for referential integrity within the model. You can see the pipeline ID gets referenced in a few tables. Again, back to Kirk's comment, one of the things that I'm fond of is normalization within the data model, but our feedback has been that the user community does not want it super normalized, and so there's a certain amount of flattening that's the theme of the Pod 7 design, and that produces these the need to have these IDs in multiple tables instead of the one, and join to it in the end. So anyway, that's a whole other conversation we can have with you here to join these conversations. Here's where we capture that from and to measure from the odometer, and so it gets stored in the inspection range table. And so again, going back to Kirk's this diagram here, you can see how the inspection cross-ref table captures the inspection ID as well as the inspection range, and so that's how you tie those two together. In this case, we only have one range per inspection, but you could have multiple ranges if you span your routes or lines. And then the ILI data is just summarized by count. I don't actually show all the records, but I just show that each one of those records, again, references back to the run that it belongs to. Yep, a minute late. With that, we'll go to another poll. Are you planning on implementing the new ILI module? Yes, we've been waiting patiently. Yes, now that I know more about it, and feel free to ask more. I'll be happy to expand on what we've talked about today. I'm not sure yet. We need to learn more. Again, the more feedback, the better we can satisfy everybody's needs. I know we're still on an earlier version of pods, some of us, but we are planning or starting to work towards that. And then finally, no plans to implement. So,
all right, launching poll here of things. And as everybody begins voting, this is great. To the panel, I have quite a few questions that have also come in along the way. So I know we just kind of have our closing slide after this, but I have a couple. So get ready, because it's time to answer some questions in our last 8 minutes together. So those of you who have not voted yet, I'm going to leave this up for about another 30 seconds. Any other thoughts?
Sure hope everyone's those first two, 100%.
That's right.
Good luck.
Right. All right. It looks like we have the majority of everyone here. So for the sake of keeping everything moving, I'm going to close the poll. Share the results. Who would like to depict this one?
I can't see them.
Well, yeah, go ahead, somebody, please. All right, I'll do it. Well, I find it kind of interesting. I was really hoping it'd all be 100% yes, but I'll take some of those no, not sure yet. So we need to learn more. And then I guess I understand the people that are on no. We're still in an earlier version of pods. That makes a lot of sense too. Those last 7%, shame on you.
We only have love here. We only have love here for everyone as we bring people to converts along the way. So, all right, before we get to the last slide, because that has a lot of information on it, let's just dig into some of these questions that we have going on here. Within things, all right, so this is another ILI, and excuse me if I'm asking a question that's been answered already within things of what you've said here. But, you know, how does the ILI data address the alignment of ILI data to known features? Does it capture any information regarding how the alignment was performed?
Ooh.
So I'll take that. So think about this table as near duplicate of the pipe tally as possible. So if there was alignment done prior to that creation of the pipe tally, then it would incorporate that. If it's not, then it is simply just trying to capture that data. It's not necessarily trying to do the analysis. This is just data capture and storage.
Awesome, absolutely. All right, I have a couple of people asking about, will this be available? Yes, the answer is this is going to be available. If for some reason you do not get an email alert saying when it's available, reach out to info@pods.org and we will make sure to get you everything that you need to have to watch along the way. All right, here's another question. This FME script is included with the ILI module. If so, is this the first time that an FME script is included with a download of the data model?
Forgot to include that part.
Yeah,
So,
I can. Oh, go ahead, Victor.
So yeah, sorry. We are in talk with Safe Software, the people who make FME, to potentially provide a user group. We've got a few of them already, and maybe start sharing of workbenches, scripts, and sample data in here. But there's also where you go for pods, the scripts and documentation. So if this doesn't work out, we could end up putting it in there. We'll keep you posted. So unless you have an update on that, Kirk.
Yeah, I was just going to comment. We were actually using that internally as well to test on the different environments, so that we can use basically the same FME script and just point it to a new target database. There were some discussions on whether this would be released. I don't know if it would be released as part of official Pod 7 release, or whether it would just be sent as a separate script. This came up with Monique yesterday, the whole FME user group, which needs to be kind of discussed internally. So I think the intent is that we want to share that, but I don't know what the plans are right now to do that. But that's the ultimate goal. And then if we did have that user community, we could collaborate more, but it wouldn't be part of the actual Pod 7 or Pods modeling. It would be a separate effort to help validate.
All right, awesome. All right, so we're going to close out the live question and answer here. However, as I'm going to be passing off to Tad to just let everybody know about some awesome things coming up with pods, please, if you think of something, get it in the question box, because we will be following up with any additional questions that come in or anything that we maybe didn't quite touch upon along the way. So Victor, do you mind going ahead and going to that last slide for us? And as Tad, as you close this out, I just want to thank each and every one of you, Diana, Victor, Tad, and Kurt, for spending time with us today. Thank you to Monique for all of the back-end organization to have this opportunity, and cannot wait for the next PODSCast next month. So Tad, go ahead, dig into everything that we need to be paying attention to.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you haven't gone out and visited yet, there is a new PODS website. Make sure you got a pods.org, not pods.com. That'll take you to the storage containers. Don't go to that one. You want pods.org. There's a lot of resources out there that's already been linked by Monique and the rest of the team to try to help get some valuable resource data to you. One of the other things to kind of think about is we're kind of talking about gas pipelines, liquid pipelines, right? But there's a lot of other pipelines and data sets that can be used within, or that can be stored within pods as well. So think about gathering and water and hydrogen and even carbon capture type stuff. We are kicking off 2 new work groups. One of them is an integrity and regulatory task. Kirk mentioned this a minute ago, it's being kicked off by Marissa. This is really to kind of outline a process of you've identified an anomaly, how are you going to get it through completion, right? There's another one kicking off that's focused on construction and projects and how to really store and manage that data over time. We've got our fall forum coming up on October 4th in Houston. So I believe you can actually go out and register for that already. That is when Utility Network is planned to be released. 25th anniversary of PODS is coming up next year. So that'll be awesome. And then lastly, kind of don't forget to complete that survey and let us know kind of what else you'd like to see and if you'd like a copy of that ILI module. And well, I guess lastly, the next thing is we do have another PODSCast coming up September 10th. So scan that QR code. It's going to focus on the value of pods and developing a return on
Investment.
Investment. I was thinking of ROE. I was like, what's going on here? So thank you.
Fantastic. So yeah, register today for the next podcast. And again, as a reminder, connect on LinkedIn with everyone that you see here today. We can't wait to talk to everyone individual and know how we can support you more. So have a blessed day, everyone. Enjoy your August. And again, Kurt, Tad, Victor, and Diana, thank you so much for your expertise and knowledge this morning.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks for having us on.
Have a good day, everyone.
Yeah.
All right. Bye-bye.